Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Welcome to the 2020 Project Orchids. This is update 2, part 4, which is the cooler, shadier ones. A little set of assorted orchids, but the thing they have in common is they don't like heat. So they love my summer in here, don't they? And even though this isn't part of the Project Orchids as such, I thought I'd start with this one. As it is a Miltoniopsis, it is a species and it is a cool grower. And it's just opened its latest spike. So I thought we'd start there. So we'll have a look at these plants at the end of the season effectively, where for this set of plants, this is actually quite a good time to do repotting if necessary, simply because they're going into the cooler period, which suits them better, with day lengths that are shorter, which suits them better. You know, 16 hours of daylight for something that grows in a montane forest is not ideal, especially when it's hot as well. So they're coming into a period where they're happier. So any repotting, this isn't a bad time. Late winter, early spring is another good time. But I find that these plants, if they're done in the autumn, you know, if they need doing, obviously, don't do it for the sake of it. But by doing it in the autumn, they've got quite a long period where they're comfortable to just settle in, possibly get some new roots going, and be in a better state of affairs to deal with what's coming next year and the heat and the longer days and everything. If you do them in the spring, they don't get much chance to settle down before they're under stress with the heat. So that's my logic anyway, and we'll see where we go. So this is the cooler, shadier ones. First up, we've got Dracula Bella. One of the large flowered species. Plant itself wasn't looking bad back in June. We had some spikes. The only thing I could say about this at that time of year was that I hope the leaves survived the heat and the plant itself as a whole, and that the spikes might just about produce a bloom. But it was anticipated that the buds would blast before opening. That's what it did the year before, and at this particular point I couldn't really see it changing. It's just humidity not high enough in the hot spell, so it survives the summer but doesn't excel. But nonetheless it carries on producing the spikes. It produces the spikes all year round, but just strangely doesn't actually bloom. At this particular point in time I was beginning to wonder about the media, but didn't do anything about it. Okay, as far as this one is concerned, it's still misbehaving. It's still growing okay. It puts up a new growth every now and again, or new leaf, whatever you want to call it, on this type of plant. So it's okay, but I'm beginning to think it doesn't really like the media it's in, that type of moss, because for a plant that size some roots should be showing. Yeah, they should have got to the edge of the basket. What does get to the edge of the basket with great frequency are the spikes. But do we get any blooms? No. But I tell you what it is doing, that I don't know whether it's normal or not, but it seems to be doing it frequently, is the spikes get to this stage and the bud aborts. But then if you look what's happened to this one, it's extended and grown another bud farther down. That one hasn't blasted yet. And this one over here has done the same. You see, it got that far, aborted the bud and grown on this extension, which looks like it's going to abort. And this one's extending as well. So I don't know whether that's normal. I haven't really had it long enough to tell. But the problem is, you see, if I want to repot this, I may lose the spikes, because obviously I've got to pull the plant up out of the basket and thread the spikes through the holes in the basket. Now these are large holes. That may well work, and even if I lost a couple, I'm sure I would also retain a couple, plus the fact it's probably going to grow some more. Don't know whether there are any new ones starting. No, not at the moment. So what we've got is what's on there. So if we're going to get any blooms, now's the time of year when it's capable of blooming because the temperatures have dropped down. I'm not getting the heat, but it grows okay. It's got a lot of weeds in it. So this is just a matter of, you know, trying to get it to bloom. Certainly get it to grow spikes, but so far they abort more frequently than ever. Forget how many we had last year, but it was only 1 or 2 throughout the whole season, but probably a dozen or more spikes. So that's just how this one reacts, and I think it's just purely lack of humidity in the air. You know, I keep mine at 75%. Now, when the temperatures drop down at night, it's a lot higher than that. It gets up towards 100% some evenings, some nights, which is brilliant, but it's the daytime. You know, that's when it's going to evaporate through its leaves, and the higher humidity in the air stops it doing it so fast, so it holds it in the plant longer. So anyway, I think at some point or another, and this time of year might not be a bad time to do it, it needs to come out of that pot and go in a different media. Still needs to go in moss, but that was the collected sphagnum moss, and I know it compacts quite badly now that I've used it. I won't use it anymore, only for decoration basically. So we'll probably have to do something about that. But at the moment it grows okay. It's done what was expected of it through the hot season, very little, and aborted its buds. That was sort of expected. That's what it did last year. But anyway, probably a repot coming soon on that one. Now the Coelogyne cristata had new growths, which I was well pleased about. I think we counted 5 at the time. Obviously at this part of the year they just look like, well, they look almost like a spike, quite honestly. But you can see 4 of them sticking up, you know, virtually straight upwards. Leaves not opened yet, no bulb formed or anything like that. And looking at them, the way the growths were at this time of year, the bulbs were going to form away from the media, so probably if any roots were produced, which they don't always on these, they weren't going to make the media. That's how this one grows. That was not going to be a problem. All I was hoping that it would carry on growing nicely through the heat, which it doesn't really like. But this one puts up with it. It's not like some of my others that suffer. This one just doesn't grow quite as well as it would do in a cooler environment, but it still grows. So let's see how this one's progressed. Now the cristata's done very well. I'm pleased with this year. It's not all one piece. There are a couple of pieces in there. Forget how many, but it's not one piece, it's several. That's how it ended up. I had to break off rotten pieces and keep the good bits, and they ended up going in one, I don't know whether to call it a pot or a basket. It's more like a basket than a pot, I suppose. But it seems to be pretty happy in there. They don't like a deep root run because you end up with a soggy media at the base that the roots aren't going to use up. So shallow's good for these. And if these grow away from the media, it doesn't actually matter that much. It's how they grow. So as long as you've got good humidity in the air, it doesn't matter that some of the sections will push away from the media and not necessarily even have any roots, which is what some of these have done. But the new growths have pushed on nicely and you know, have matured nicely. There's good sized bulbs on these. There's not a sign of a wrinkle anywhere, so they're all good to go. And this is the only smaller one. And again, this one's pushed away from the media, but they just feed themselves through the rhizome. They don't need a lot of food basically, relatively low feeders, but this time of year in the autumn is a good time to get some feed into them to make sure they fully have matured their new growths and they're not slinking away from being full size, because if they are, they might not bloom. Yeah, you need these bursting with energy and strength as they go into the quiet period in the winter when they stop growing, and then that puts them in a good position to produce good blooms. So yeah, pleased with the progress on this. It's come on nicely, and growths have matured. Got nice green leaves on it, and it's turning into quite a sized plant now. You know, and we've even got one that's managed to escape and come out through the side of the basket. That's fine. You know, that's fine. That puts it in a brilliant place for a pendulous spike if it produces one, because that is a new growth there. So if that one blooms, a nice little cascade of blooms there. So done well. I would say as good as, if not better than expected. So it's obviously got a hold in this basket now and is growing away happily. And hopefully it's going to do the same again next year, after blooming, of course. Let's have some blooms. Late winter, early spring, I believe, for this one. Yeah, there we go then. Good one. Now, the Masdevallia ignea, we'd actually played a little game with this one based on a talk at an orchid society, basically, about try quite a lot more light and see if you can get it to bloom. Well, we did, and it did. It actually came up onto one of the higher shelves for a while, and it did actually manage to push out a bloom. So, you know, the experiment sort of worked. But then I didn't want that bright light on that plant through the hot spell. That's two lots of stress, basically. That, you know, it might put up with the light in cool temperatures with high humidity, but not with heat. So I put it back down on its normal shelf. This was another one that was in a type of moss, a collected sphagnum that compacts. And although it seemed to be growing okay, there was a little niggle in the back of my mind that it possibly wasn't doing as well as it should do in that media. So, right, bit of a disaster on this one, although hopefully recoverable. I don't know how many years you have to be growing before you remember not to leave things in the pot too long because you lose your roots. I've known this for longer than I can remember, and yet I still get caught with it every now and again. And this one has just been one of those. The repot video wasn't that long ago, and we took it out of its pot. It was growing in moss with some bark, and it had 0 roots. The whole root base had rotted off completely. So the plant came into pieces, trying to get the dead bits and the rotten bits off. So some small amounts of the plant were lost, and we ended up with pieces that have been put in damp moss to try and get some roots to grow. Now, since that wasn't that long ago, so I don't expect to see any progress for a bit yet. But it's an ideal time of year for a cold grower to be recovering, because that's what it is. Unless the sun comes out, my highs, my daytime temperatures are around 20, 21 at the moment. And I mean, at the moment it's 20 and it's 85% humidity. So this one's happy, or happier than it certainly has been in the summer. It did have some new growths on it when it was repotted, or I can't say it's been repotted really. It's in temporary accommodation. It's not staying in that damp moss as it is like that, although it's not coming out of there until I see a good root base that I can work with, not just a couple of tiny little ones. I need a good root base, and it's in a reasonable position to be able to do that if it's capable of doing it. So this is now in a full state of recovery. 0 roots. I think there was one, about 1 inch long. But it didn't have a growing tip on it. So this has got to completely grow a new root system. And it's got the winter to do it before it's going to get put under any additional stress next year when the heat comes back. And we should have a workable plant by then, I would hope. So that's that one. This is one of the 3 Miltoniopsis that we got from Burnham's, but that's not really where they came from. At our 60th anniversary show. It's the largest of the 3, and quite honestly the one that's progressing the best. And at this point it wasn't doing bad. You can see a good spurt of new root growth there at the front of the pot. That was accompanying a reasonable new growth pushing up. There was sign of another new growth in the middle of the plant, and there were some roots at this point. It had grown some roots, but it was in a position now where the new growth was high, and given the temperatures through my summer, the chances are that new little burst of root growth there might actually be lost. At this point it wasn't looking bad, but that's by no means a guarantee that it's going to look good in 3 months' time. But I was pleased that the plants hadn't died despite having virtually no roots when I got them, and that they were progressing slowly but surely in a summer that doesn't do them any good at all. So not bad, let's just survive the summer. Right, so out of those 3 Miltoniopsis that we got at our 60th anniversary show, this is the one that's recovering the best. It's still not right, but it's a flipping sight better than it was, and it now at least has some strong new growths pushing up. A friend of mine said he expected these to all be dead by the end of the year. Well, quite honestly, then it's still not doing wonderfully well, but then Miltoniopsis are never destined to do that well in here. It's too flipping hot for them. But we've got a nice strong new growth coming up in the middle there, and that other one round here, that's pushing on nicely. It's doing a typical thing that Miltoniopsis often do. Yeah, the new growth, this one's come out high. The next new growth has come out inside these leaves. Yeah. So any roots that come out of that now are just going to find their way up the leaves. They're not going to find their way down into the pot. But they haven't started yet. And the thing is with these, they hate stale media. And although these were repotted when I got them, and it doesn't seem a long time ago, actually it is. So these are due a repot. And at the time this gets repotted, I'm not sure whether it went in here as 2 plants, but it might well come out as 2 plants so that I can get at this new growth here. We've pushed out this one, quite small, and the roots were above the media and didn't get down in there before they failed. And that's going to happen with this one soon. Yeah, you can't pot these too deep, they'll rot. So they've got to be put in right to allow them to grow. And this one, when it does start to produce its roots, they're not going to get in the media unless they get some help. And the help will be to take these pieces off and get that a lot closer to the media. In doing so, some of these roots might start growing again. But it has grown roots. There are roots down in the pot. It's not a massive root system by any means, but there are roots in the pot. So it's not what I would call a good root system yet by any means, but I mean, it was debatable whether those 3 plants had fusarium. They certainly had all the signs, and they certainly had rotten roots when I got them. And being relatively large plants, it's harder to recover a large Miltoniopsis with no roots, because it's got far more to support. But this one is doing the best out of the 3. I don't know when we'll see blooms on it, if at all. I suspect we might get a spike on this growth when it matures, but I doubt it unless we can get the roots down in there when they start. And the same with the other one. So probably a work in progress, this one, but certainly not dead yet. And given that we have had an awful lot of heat this year, it's doing okay. You know, I'd say better than expected, but it's still not good, still not brilliant. It might look it, but it's got deficiencies. You know, it's got roots that have failed before they got to the media. And the roots that it's not a big enough root system to support that plant properly and put out some good spikes and everything. So it's still a work in progress, but it is at least progressing. So, and now we've got the cooler season, I suspect that all 3 of those plants are going to get some fresh media. Right time of year at the moment, and then they can settle in through the winter in the cool months, you know, with the lower light levels, ready to push on next year. So some work to do there, I suspect. Now this little one, Miltoniopsis phalaenopsis, will make up your mind already. At this particular point, it had produced a few roots. It wasn't a good root system, but it actually started to grow and was pushing up some new growths. They looked a little wispy, but not having had the plant that long, you know, there's a lot of Oncidium types that push up a very wispy looking growth, and then the bulb forms at the bottom and everything looks normal again, if you know what I mean. But it was growing and it did have a few roots. All it had to do really was survive the summer, which I'll discuss in a minute, but for this one is not quite such a difficult job. I'll tell you why. Now the little species Miltoniopsis is actually holding on. I wouldn't say it's rocketing away by any means, but it's holding on quite nicely. We've now got some roots, whereas we had very little when we started. Miltoniopsis phalaenopsis. We've lost this new growth here, that one's failed, but the others are pushing on and have produced roots. So we've got 2, maybe 3 new growths on this that have been successful and 1 failure. And we do have some roots. I don't expect this to bloom until next year. I'd be very surprised if it did. The bulbs aren't mature, you know, they haven't formed an actual bulb yet. But they're making their way. As I say, it's now coming into a period where it should do okay. Out of the Miltoniopsis species, believe it or not, this one comes in at the bottom end of intermediate temperature-wise. This isn't a cold grower. Cold to cool, but I'd say cool to intermediate for this one. It does actually come from places lower down than the other 4 or 5 species that are still hanging on in the wild. Some probably ain't going to be there much longer, but yeah, so this one grows a little bit warmer than the others, so this one in theory should be happier here, you know, even though the summers are still too warm for it, but it's not going to affect it quite as bad as perhaps some of the others. So yeah, I'm pleased that it's managed to produce some roots and is progressing with some of its new growths. Given its bad start in life, that's good. You know, that's a good bit of progress. So coming on, doing okay. Now this little Paphiopedilum is, it's struggled for years now. The only reason it's still here is that I'm trying to rescue it. It was Hannah's once, and I got it as a rootless plant, and a rootless Paphiopedilum is it's just not good. They're slow growing at best. But anyway, it had not long been repotted at this point in time, and it had 1 root, I believe, that wasn't really growing that much. It had just produced a new leaf, a full-size leaf, that's the one sticking upright, but no sign of any new actual fan or growth, or no sign of new roots or anything like that. It was just, you can only say it was just about hanging on, but no progress whatsoever for some considerable time. Now unfortunately I think this one's gone. I might be wrong, but it's dropped a leaf, so it's gone down from 4 to 3, and you sort of think, well, that's all right, it's growing a new one. Yeah, new leaves aren't normally black, are they? Even though this has really dark colours as part of its makeup, I've got a feeling the new growth's gone. And if the growth in the crown goes on a what is already a weak Paphiopedilum, the chances are that's it. It could do with growing a new growth from the base and pushing out a new root system with it, but we do have a root in here that is actually growing. It's got a growing tip on it, but it's just the one, which is not good. But to me, that leaf looks like it's died. Because there's no, you know, okay, it could have the dark colour on the bit we can see the outside, but down in the centre it should be green, and it's not. So I think we may have lost that little one. Mind you, this is its 3rd year trying to recover from a plant with no roots. So, you know, it's done well to have lasted this long. But I think that may be it now, so this one may not be with us next time round. I mean, I'm always going to give it a chance. And even if it stops growing out of here, and that new growth at the top just doesn't, as long as it doesn't rot the plant, it's got 3 leaves, and 3 leaves are enough, possibly, to push out a new growth. It's always been a single fan. It's never made any effort whatsoever to grow another fan. I mean, it might be that this particular one needs to bloom to finish a fan off and trigger the start of a new one. I don't know. Anyway, it'd be a shame to lose it. It's got gorgeous leaves on it, but it's never done well. Started with no roots and has had little spurts when it looks like it's going to make it and recover, and then it just goes down again. So we'll see. This one may not be there next time round. Okay, so that's the last one in the set of update 2, set of 4. So I can put that away now, and we will come back and visit all these plants in their sets as update 3, which will be in December, 3 months time. So basically I shall file everything away. What I do is the video clips that I've just done in this particular update, I take stills from those and file them away to become the start of what will be update 3 in December. So we always start with the stills, which is what they look like in the previous updates. So that's how that works. So even though I can get this video posted, and apologies that it's late, this was supposed to have been done in September, but a little event took place that sort of sidetracked me a bit. We all know what that was. Anyway, so that's the last one for now, and then we will start again in December in the depths of winter with the shortest days, and we may or may not have grow lights set up. I still haven't made my mind up. Do I want the bother? Bearing in mind I went 5 or 6 years without them and nothing died. And I must admit quite honestly, although plants ticked over better with the grow lights, for the fuss I'm not sure I got a huge benefit really. I didn't see that much difference, but that's still to be thought about. It's not quite time yet, although we must be down near 11.5 hours by now, and the rate drops off quite dramatically now, and once we get down towards 11 hours and less, everything is going to slow right up and basically stop growing. So there we go. As far as the giveaway draw is concerned, those of you that are still here, I do make a rod for my back sometimes. I think the number of people that have entered into the draw is around 200. So that's 200 channel names I've had to take out and put into spreadsheets and put numbers next to them. But the bulk of it's done now. The video was posted early yesterday, I think. Early yesterday? Yes. And every half an hour or so I just sat on the computer and took the latest few people that had asked to go in the draw out and put them in the spreadsheets. And then yesterday evening I had a final flurry where I got everything up to date, and then first thing this morning I finished it off. And although there's still a trickle of people coming in, you're welcome to carry on. Basically you can carry on putting your name down up to the day before the draw. I don't mind, so there's no sort of time limit, but my plan is to do the draw next Saturday. So I will probably cut, you know, the spreadsheets off with the updates next Friday. So you've still got a week. I don't think people will still be stumbling across that a week later. But anyway, that's how that's going. And yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be fun to find out who they are and get all the details sorted out. That'll be a bit of fun as well. Right, anyway, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. I hope you enjoy these Project Orchids sets. It is nice to see the progress of plants recorded, documented, chatted about, and put in a sequence that's followable. You know, anybody who's a sucker for punishment, you can go right back to the start where the plants were first looked at, which is last year, you know, and then update 1 with the 4 parts, and now update 2 with the 4 parts. It's a lot of videos to watch, relatively time consuming, but you could perhaps follow part 1. So that set of orchids, look through the part 1 initially, and then the part 1 update 1 and the part 1 update 2, and follow a set of whatever it is, 6 or 7 plants. So there we go, growing season virtually over, and we'll see how they've settled down for what will be an unofficial rest, because a lot of the plants will slow down and do next to nothing. But this set might actually be doing some growing. Out of the 4 parts, the ones in this part might actually be moving, because they're coming into a more happy time for them. See you next time then. Thanks for dropping by.